All right, hi everybody. Unfortunately, because of my duties at the Minnesota house, I don't have as much time to make videos as I would like, which you guys have probably figured out by the fact that I haven't put up a reading video in like forever, and they're just random videos that I use for my campaign. But I did want to put out an end of year 2023 reading summary tier list, because these are easy videos to make. This is not going to be as highly polished and edited as normal, but I just wanted to get out there to have some conversations about some great books that I read with the community. So this is what we're gonna do. As normal, there is an S, A, B, C, and D tier. Now, especially because I'm not reading anymore as like a reviewer in any sort of like official or even unofficial capacity, this is just like my personal reading. I really don't have any like bad books that I've read. So even the lowest tier, D, is generally books that I kind of forgot about, but like these aren't like harsh criticism for, just so everybody knows. I'll also try not to talk a ton about my nonfiction books, because I know most people here are interested more about my fiction reading, and particularly sci-fi fantasy, which I had to do a couple this year. So just heads up, that's where it's at. Let's jump right into it, because there's a lot of it. First one is a banger, Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut. If you've never read it, wonderful anti-war book, and it is verging, I think, on fantasy in that there is some time traveling elements, or maybe not traveling, but in actually a similar way to Dune in a weird way. I'm reading Dune right now. Like, time is not a constant in how this story is told. Really would recommend it. If you haven't read Slaughterhouse-Five, read it. It's really funny and also tragic. Really, really great. I was kind of in this like comedic classic mode, which is why I picked up Slaughterhouse-Five. And after liking Slaughterhouse-Five so much, I was like, oh, let's try Catch-22. Joseph, I think it's Heller, or is it Keller? And I was not a huge fan of this. There was something that really made me laugh, or some things that really made me laugh, really worked. Mosiphian, is that the guy's name? Mosiphian? I'm forgetting how to say his name, but funny. But I just really kind of lost the plot in this. Not like actually, but just like kind of dragged a little bit. And while the shtick is really, really good, I think for the first 100 pages, didn't follow through for the rest. So I'm just gonna put that in a classic C tier. This is something I think a lot of people will be interested in, and that is Nine Princes in Amber by Roger Zelazny, the Amber Chronicles. I picked this up randomly because it was on one of those top 100 fantasy books that like Time did or someone did a couple years ago, and I just kind of look at it every once in a while. And this series, I think, has largely been forgotten. Even on like when Reddit puts out their, sci-fi fantasy books of the year, this is like way down in like the 90s or 100s, and I think that is a travesty, because this is a great series. They're all very, very short, like 150, 200 pages. They have sort of that pulpy atmosphere, meaning like they're very quick. Things happen that are like contained, but they're also part of a larger series, so you can kind of get deep into stuff, and things develop over a long course, even though like the main plot happens very swiftly. But I just really, especially this first book, Nine Princes in Amber, I think everyone should read. Again, it's like 200 pages, and it opens with just a regular guy who's in the hospital after getting into a car accident. And weird stuff starts happening where he thinks, there's just something in his past doesn't line up with his experience and what's happening. And it just kind of goes from there. It's like this great combination of like a classic like memory loss story with a cool fantasy element and other world element, and it's just really good. It's kind of like, I think this is probably going to be the best book on this list that I rank that you've never heard of. You meaning most of you out there. I've actually seen recently some of my friends have been reading more Zelazny, so hopefully he'll get a boost in the booktube area while I read him. But there's going to be a couple books from the Amber Chronicles on here. This is my favorite so far, the first one, but they're all really worth it. Highly would recommend it, especially if you're reading like a large series, like I'm reading Dune right now, you're reading Wheel of Time or whatever, and you need like a break in between books. They are perfect for that, because again, they're all short, clear, very different from classic fantasy, but still in that genre if you like it. Really, really good. Highly recommend. All right, so next up, this little one is Jane Eyre. Classic for a reason. It's fantastic. I mean, I'm not going to say a whole bunch about Jane Eyre, except even if you don't usually like classics, I think Jane Eyre is a wonderful place to start classics. Yes, it's big, but it just draws you in so strongly. End of White Politics, I don't really remember. That's why I'm putting it in D. So that's not saying one or the negative, but obviously whatever it said did not stick with me. And I'm going quick because I wanted to get to the Eyre Affair. I'm forgetting the author of this book. Who wrote the Eyre Affair? I am Googling. Jasper Fjord, I guess. Sounds like a pen name, but even if it is a really fun murder mystery around the book Jane Eyre. So if you're going to read Jane Eyre, I think this is a great second thing to happen. It reminded me actually a lot of a T.J. Klune style. He's the guy who did House at the End of... No. What is it? House in the Cerulean Sea. There you go. One of my favorites of a couple of years ago. Kind of this like really fun, vibrant world. But this one very particularly is kind of taking that sort of fun and vibrant fantasy element world into like a Sherlock Holmes murder mystery style story. Really, really great. Would highly recommend it. It's also part of like a series. I think there's a bunch of different books in the series. I didn't go forward. I felt that this was fun, but I wasn't like compelled to go forward. But would strongly recommend that book, especially if you're a big Jane Eyre fan, as I am. Next up, Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower. Now, this might be a little controversial because I'm just going to put this at B. I really enjoyed it. My wife read it and was like totally in love with it. And in many ways, Octavia Butler in this gives one of the most realistic pictures of a near future apocalyptic landscape. I would say kind of like it's similar to Cormac McCarthy's The Road, where like it very well kind of pictures what could happen apocalyptically, but like The Road is like far out, at least in my mind. Like, you know, that's 20, 25, 30 years in the future, whereas Parable of the Sower is like 5-10 years. If horrible things happen and we get an apocalypse. I don't think we're actually going to get there, but like this is a believable post-apocalyptic world. Octavia Butler is a really, really good writer. I was not satisfied completely with the character development as it went on post-commune. I'll just say that without any spoilers. So it's a great read, definitely would recommend it, but I'm not in love with it like a lot of people I've seen on BookTube. Speaking of great but not in love with, Wuthering Heights, another absolute classic. I guess I was just into the Bronte sisters this year. It's not Jane Eyre, but it's really, really good. I mean, it's got to go above Zelazny. Sorry, Zelazny. And the Eyre Affair is not S tier. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing there. I was just putting it next to Jane Eyre. Eyre Affair is like a B. It's good, but not amazing. Sorry, I forgot that I was doing a ranking system. Wuthering Heights, it's a classic. It's great. You should read it. This is the second time I read it. I read it in high school and liked it, but, you know, didn't fall in love with it in the same way that I did this time around. It's a really, really powerful story, even though it's not like the most fun. All right, so here we go. I read... the first 3 books in the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. And this is the first one, which is... I'm forgetting the name... of Thomas Covenant. What's the first one? The first one is, of course, Lord Fowle's Bane, which is a very hard title to say, but also it kind of sticks with you. Similarly, actually, almost exactly my thoughts on this series, I read the first 3, is what I think of with The Black Company. I read both of them because I knew they were very inspirational to my favorite fantasy author, Stephen Erickson, who writes the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And so I wanted to have that background and kind of see what inspired him, and I absolutely see why these things inspired him. Surprisingly, I didn't know this, but Thomas Covenant is a portal fantasy. It's this guy who gets drawn into another world, and it is very dark in the sense of they don't shy away from adult themes like rape or, like annihilation of like a whole people, or like inter-fantasy race politics, which sounds weird but makes sense in the book. And the first book especially I found very enthralling, very interesting, and very profound in a lot of ways. It has its problems, but I really, really enjoyed this first book. I am gonna put it on the first one at B. But it's really on the edge. I really liked it. The end of this, to go kind of back to my Black Company comparison here, is that I found real diminishing returns as I continued on in the series, and I finished the first trilogy and was like, that's enough. I kind of get why this is inspirational. Glad I read it, but I'm not going to go any further. So there's two other books I'm just going to get through. The Ill-Earth War. It's kind of go on the bottom of B, and then the third one, which is, I don't even remember, and I don't really care that much. I did not like all that much. I skimmed towards the end because I was just kind of losing steam. So that's what I thought there. Let's move on. Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky. This is really the only major Dostoevsky work that I hadn't read before. And kind of funnily enough, this is something that I should like. It's kind of post-structural, even though timeline it plays with structure, it plays with theme and idea, and whether you can trust the narrator or not. But it did not jive with me. I know that's very weird for someone with my normal taste, but I'm just being honest with you there. The second book in the Chronicles of Amber. I can't really talk a lot about these without giving away what I think is the best part of the first one, which is the mystery of who is this guy that you wake up with. So I'm not going to say more except that it's really fun. Really enjoyed it. Not as good as the first book, but still very good. What is this little... Oh, these short stories of Anton Chekhov. Most people probably know Chekhov because of Chekhov's gun. This idea that if you introduce something, you have to use it in a story, which is more like his play writing than his short story writing, which this is part of. But really enjoy this. It's a collection of short stories. I tried to get more into essay and short form stuff this year. Not super successfully as I'm looking at this list. But Chekhov is great to read, especially Word Number 6. I think is a great place to start. It's a fantastic story. I'm going to put that in A. Red Badge of Courage, a classic. I understand why people like it for that anti-war kind of feel, but it just didn't jive with me. I got kind of bored with it. There's that. Hero of Two Worlds, great biography on the Marquis de Lafayette. A lot of stuff I didn't know. I'm going to put that in the B tier. It's enjoyable. Ill-Earth, I think, needs to go further. Actually, I'm just going to go down here. Yeah. Okay, this is going to be a controversial take because the next one is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. A lot of people told me to get into N.K. Jemisin, recommended her quite a bit, and I really liked The Fifth Season. The writing style was fun, it was different, the sort of twist in it worked for me, I didn't see it coming, really impactful, but I have not picked up the second book in that trilogy, and I don't feel any need to, and the further I get from it, the more details slip away much more than in other series. So again, this is kind of similar to Parable of Sorrow, where I enjoyed it, but it didn't stick with me like I thought that it would. So I'm just going to put in that A tier. Enjoyable, but I think some people would think that would be an S tier pick for me, and it just was not. Another Zelazny book. Again, all of these are kind of going to go in the A or B tier. I don't want to say too much about them because there is some spoilers. So let's talk about Soldier Son trilogy, which is a Robin Hobb trilogy, the last Robin Hobb books that aren't short fiction that I'm reading for the first time. And I really, really enjoyed reading this series. Navarre is a great character. All of the great thoughtfulness that Hobb is known for in the realm of the Elderlings is there. You still get that. But having said all that, this would be my least favorite of the Hobb stories, as far as her fantasy trilogies. Worth reading, but I don't think this is quite up to the same standard as the average in the realm of the Elderlings, and certainly not up to something like the Mad Ship or Live Ship Traders trilogy, which I think is one of the best ever written. So for that reason, Shaman's Crossing is the first book. This one has a lot of really fun like school stuff because one of the guys goes to like a military training school and it's got that academy feel. So I really enjoyed that. That's going to go up into A. The second one, Forest Mage, drags a little bit for me, which puts it at the top of B. And then the third one, I'm just going to go over here. The ending is better, and so this is going to go back up on A. And I didn't think that Hobb was going to be able to land the plane, but she does. And so really enjoyed that. Probably not as much as the first one, but it is a satisfactory end. But there's one particular storyline that goes on for quite a long time, and we somewhat get into kind of the loop problem that Hobb sometimes has, where the same character kind of goes through the same struggle over and over again, which is true to real life, but sometimes I find a little frustrating in her works that I don't like as much as her major works. It's another critique I have of like the last series in the realm of the Otherlings. But some more nonfiction stuff I'm going to get through quick here. Fight Like Hell is a great history, very quick, succinct history of the labor movement in the United States. Strongly recommend. Someone should have. I have two good books on the fight for a living wage, specifically for a $15 minimum wage in the United States. That's really good. I'm just going to quickly go through that. This is a book, The Bible Told Them So, that is about segregation in the South, specifically in Christian schools. Good book, but I'm not going to talk about it a lot here on this channel. Now we're to a banger, a real banger, one of the best books ever written, War and Peace. Absolute amazing book. This year I also read Anna Karenina, which for some reason I'm realizing now is not on this list. I don't know why, but we'll just say these are together because War and Peace and Anna Karenina are both fantastic. Leo Tolstoy is a genius. I would say Anna Karenina is the best of Tolstoy. It's, in my opinion, like seriously, one of the best books ever written, like top 5. Great book. But War and Peace is also really good. I feel like it's become sort of a joke because it's so long, right? Doorstop kind of thing. But it's so worth it. Please read Tolstoy if you haven't. Fantastic. Especially out there, by the way, I know a lot of people I have are Malazan fans, and actually War and Peace is sort of like a classic. It feels somewhat like a classic Malazan book, so strongly recommend that as a way into classics for Malazan fans. Battle for Spain is on the Spanish Civil War in the 30s. I thought was really great. Sorry, not great. It was good, informative. Virginia Woolf's classic, A Room of Their Own. This is an essay where she talks about how hard it is to be a female artist in a lot of ways, and especially interacting with a lot of the past. Very thoughtful, strongly would recommend. Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, also great. That's going to be probably a little better than Wuthering Heights for me. A classic murder mystery. Like it's amazing to read that book now, knowing all the true crime podcasts and things that are out there, because like basically Truman Capote invented this genre, and wonderful writer. Strongly would recommend. Ejaculate Responsibly, probably the best nonfiction book I read this year by Gavriel Kay, and it's about how important it is to talk about the responsibility of males in the idea of unwanted pregnancies, and that our society puts basically all the weight on reproductive freedom and thought, and when you start a family, on females, or those who can conceive, and almost none on males, who are way more fertile, many more days. It's a great argument. It's very clear, succinct. It's like 150 pages. I would strongly recommend it. I got it from the library, and then I bought it because I wanted to have it. Really good. This next book is Cameraman, which is a history of Buster Keaton, or a biography of Buster Keaton. I got into a huge Buster Keaton phase because one of my favorite podcasts, the Blank Check podcast, got into his films. I watched a lot of his films, and they had on this author. I'm forgetting her name, but she did a great job on this book, and so I read it. It's fascinating. He is a really fascinating picture, fascinating person. Struggled with alcohol abuse, went through a lot of different phases of his life because he was huge as a child in vaudeville, and then went to Hollywood. And to contrast him, especially with Charlie Chaplin and the Marx Brothers and Harold Lloyd and a couple other people in early cinema, really, really great. I loved it, especially if you like early Hollywood stuff. Would strongly recommend Cameraman. Another all-time book here, and that is The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Ardent. Just like it sounds, it goes through the authoritarian movements in Europe in the early 20th century. It's hard to talk about this book because it's one of the densest books I've read, but it is so profound, and I really appreciated how she didn't use kind of the classic, the left extreme was the USSR and Stalin, and the right extreme was Nazism. But she talks about how the similarities in totalitarianism developed in those two main arenas and led to some of the worst atrocities in the 20th century. And all through it, she has so many great gems and thoughts and reflections. I can't get into it now, but if you're into, really dense, but thoughtful reflections on government, society, prejudice, all that kind of stuff, would strongly recommend the Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Ardent. Back to something that people want to hear me talk about: fantasy literature, The Lions of Alrasan. My first guy, Gavriel Kay, a Canadian author that a lot of people talk about when they talk about Canadian authors, along with Stephen Erickson, again, one of my favorites. So this is another thing where I went there. I started with Lions of Alrasan, which I think is, most people would think would be weird, because normally people go to Tigana and then sort of go from there, because Tigana, I think, is like his most famous work. But I had this on my shelf, and I think it was just like one day I had finished a book and didn't really know where else I was going to go. I said, hey, I'll give this a try. Wonderful. It's like a really, really well done Game of Thrones style epic, but in only a single book. Like, it's really fantastic. Love the slight twist on basically the Iberian Peninsula of the 7th and 8th and 9th centuries, as the Muslim empires were clashing with the Christian empires in Europe on this peninsula, and how that had ripples culturally, as well as obviously in war and culture as a whole. I think is really, really fascinating. Love this book. I'm going to definitely give it an A, and actually put it pretty high up in that category. Next up, we have Monsters, which is about, it's a nonfiction book on what to do with artists who are amazing artists like Picasso, but are terrible people and have been known to abuse people, and about if that's necessary, and this idea of art being suffering and even inflicting suffering on other people. Interesting reflections. I felt like there wasn't a really clear landing point on it, but it made me think, and I enjoyed that. Next up, there's another new author for me that I never tried before, but that, as many people have told me, certainly is amazing. I agree. I read my first Stephen King this year in October, Pet Sematary. Someone recommended that as like a good place to go. It's short, and one of his early stuff, and I completely agree. Pet Sematary was wonderful, scared the shit out of me in many ways, but also it's not just there for scariness, it's also like this incredibly thoughtful and challenging book about grief and life and the fragility of life. Really tears her heart out in many senses. Strongly would recommend. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, another new author for me. I'm going to put this kind of at the top of B. I didn't like this as much as other people did. I thought it was a very interesting sort of academic thing. Again, I haven't read Susanna Clarke, especially Dr. Norrell, which I think is like, or Jonathan Strange and Dr. Norrell. Yeah, that I think a lot of people really love, and I think I might like, but I just haven't gotten there yet. It certainly didn't reach the heights of dark academia. Like, my favorites are like Babel by R.F. Kuang, but I enjoyed it. I guess is the most I can say there. But it didn't want me, kind of like Stephen King and Gavriel Kay, when I finished those books, I was like, I gotta read more of those authors. So Anna Clark was kind of like, this is good, but I don't have to go out of my way to read another one. So, and I know a lot of people who really love Susanna Clark, so somewhat surprising. Dune is incredible, a masterpiece. Absolutely love it. I'm going to maybe make a video about that. I don't know, but it's just great. So I read Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune this year. All three were great. Don't, in any sense, regret that at all. I'm just finishing up some stuff here. So this is another Zelazny one that I'm not going to talk about. Portable Victorian poets. If you want to get into poetry but don't know where to start, these small Viking collections are really, really good, because it's like a bunch of stuff. You don't like someone or something, so like flip 10 more pages and it's a new poet. I really enjoyed those. This one was the Romantic Poets collection. Recommend. And then The Last Politician is a new biography on, it's not a biography really, but about Joe Biden's first 2 years in office. Thought that was interesting. I'm not gonna talk about that here, but here we go. This is my 2023. I only read 40 books, I think, and I kind of did a spattering here of some other stuff. So mostly a pretty complete year that I'm really happy with. But I mean, the best books I read this year are not going, I think, to surprise anyone. War and Peace, Anna Karenina, Jane Eyre, the Dune trilogy, Origins of Totalitarianism, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Ejaculate Responsibly is probably something that people weren't expecting me to talk about here, but that's that. Another huge recommendation I would have is, if you haven't picked up Roger Zelazny's Nine Kings in Amber, or Nine Princes in Amber, the Amber Chronicles. There's also an omnibus where you can get all of them together. I would strongly recommend it. Have so enjoyed having those books. And yeah, that's my year. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are on them, things you might want to see me read in the new year. What did I used to say? Oh yeah, first in, last out.